Guys, we are getting close. We are getting close to the Nolan Wells case. The TikToker users, they're coming up with a big bombshell. You guys have to watch this video. We have TikTokers, Pink Panda. She is coming out with new information today. She came out with this information on Sunday. So this is fresh off the case. And she said it's a lot of stuff that we have missed, so she wants to look over. She got some information that's definitely going to be a bombshell to the case. When I tell you, come Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Nancy Grace is going to be talking about this. Tia Satel is going to be talking about this. Everybody is going to be talking about this week. So make sure you stay to the end and listen to everything they have to say in this video, because this right here, this is going to shake the table.
Sometimes in order to go forward in an investigation, you have to go back to the beginning. And once I did, I realized we have missed something huge, y'all.
Crocs on the ground, and you're never gonna believe what I just found.
Y'all, something new just surfaced in the Nolan Wells case, and this one has me going back through the timeline again. Because we're now seeing claims about a Triton boat sitting behind a security fence. We're seeing questions about whether that boat could be connected to the investigation. And we're seeing a new breakdown of an original MDMR report that raises a completely different question. How did investigators get certain names connected to Nolan Wells in the first place? And that's where this gets interesting. Because according to the information being circulated online, there may be a connection between what investigators were doing on July 5th, the people who were reportedly on Horn Island that morning, and information that eventually appeared in an investigative report. Now, let me be very clear before we go any further. None of what you're about to hear is our conclusion. These are claims, interpretations, and information being discussed by people following the case. We're going to let the sources speak first. Then I'm going to come back and break down what actually matters, what can potentially be verified, and where the speculation begins. So don't go anywhere, because this one has several layers. And before we get into it, if you've been following Nolan's case, keep his family in your prayers. If you believe Nolan's story deserves continued attention, hit that like button, subscribe to the Black Docket, and share this video. We're not here to convict anybody through YouTube. We're here to ask questions, examine information, and follow the evidence wherever it leads. Now, watch this.
And yes, I have already tried making a video about this, so let's try it again. All right, so according to one of the original MDMR reports, Captain William Freeman called the Master Sergeant and told them to locate and interview a female subject. And that's how we get to this girl, Lainey. Now, this has always bothered me because I'm like, why is Lainey's name in this report? Why was she brought up at all? Especially since, according to Lainey, she hadn't seen Nolan in over a year and was on a completely different island. So it never made sense to me. And then it effing hit me. So according to this report, on July 5th at 9 a.m., assistance was requested from Captain Freeman as part of the drone search. Freeman was transported to Horn Island, and at approximately 10 a.m. he tried 3 failed launches. It ended up being a software error, and he was unable to fix it in the field. So then at 10:30, Freeman requests that Smith come out and assist with drone duty. Freeman and another officer went and picked up Smith and transported him to Horn Island. But by 12:40, the first drone finally takes flight. Now, wait a minute. If Freeman was out on Horn Island trying to do this drone launch, had to call in assistance, go and get that person, bring them back to Horn Island, then when the F did he get this information about Lainey? Oh, wait, I have an idea.
Who was looking for Nola? Who was on the boat? Was it multiple boats? Multiple boats. Okay, can you explain that? Who was out of this group? Who was on what boat? Or who was on a boat or not going out looking for Nola?
So, me, Wyatt, and Trayson got in the boat. We got in the Palm Beach that morning, the morning after, and to the islands, and we were met by DMR. There was 7 DMR boats already out there, DMR and park rangers. We talked to them, we gave them all of our information. They personally asked if any of us were on the boat with him that day. We told them yes. They just said, all right, well, we got the area scoped out. And then after that, we just went up to the beach. I think we met up with y'all. Yeah.
Okay, so by Morgan's own words, he, Trayson, and Wyatt were on the Palm Beach out at Horn Island talking to MDMR. Oh, and when was that? When did they do that?
From 9:45 to 11:50, 12 o'clock era, about lunchtime. While we were on the water, we talked to a rescue guy.
Oh, you were out there until 11:50, you say? You mean 5 minutes before this phone call happened? Does that sound like a coincidence to you? Now, I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility to conclude that they were the ones who gave this information to Captain Bill Freeman. Again, why would they give Lainey's name if she wasn't there in that group that day? Especially when he was supposedly last seen with Katie, whose name again is conveniently absent from any report that we've seen. Now, this is about to get deep, y'all, because I reread the line again, now knowing that the boys were the ones who probably gave this information and not just some random good citizen. Specific wording says, Captain Freeman said to locate and interview a female subject that was possibly involved with the missing person on Horn Island. Possibly involved? How did I miss that? How did we all miss that? Because there's 2 other boys mentioned in this that they don't make contact with, and it just says possible names associated with Wells. That is very different and intentional language. Now, as I've told y'all, I've spent weeks learning the dynamics of all these different friend groups and who they're friends with online, etc. Now, this is Lainey. Now, most people have clocked this picture where Lainey is with a girl who is wearing the same swimsuit last 4th of July as the one that is on the boat with Katie. I'm going to try and do this in the easiest way possible. I have narrowed down the BFF group with Lainey and these girls. All of these girls have called each other their best friends and taken pictures with each other at some point or another. Now, none of these girls are friends with any of the Wyatt Warren friend group. All of them are friends with Trayston and Trayston's sister. Trayston's sister has best friend picture relationships with all of these girls. It's very clear that this is a core group of friends. There's group pictures with them, they've lived together, etc. Now, Kendall is the one in the blue and red bikini in this picture. But I found another picture of Bailey and Maggie here from last 4th of July wearing the exact same red and blue swimsuit that Kendall was wearing. So it's pretty safe to say that these girls coordinated all wearing the same bathing suit. Also found this picture of Lainey from 2 4th of Julys ago wearing this bathing suit. Does it look familiar to anybody? That's right, that is clearly the same bathing suit from the boat with Katie, with a face that's conveniently been blurred. Now, do we think it's a coincidence that 2 swimsuits associated with this friend group all ended up on the same boat as Katie? I'm gonna say the chances are slim. Now, Kendall seems to have a longtime boyfriend, and guess what his name is? Jacob Brooks, which is the second name that comes up on this report. And guess who seems to be Lainey's longtime boyfriend? Drew Johnson, the other name on this report. Now, Drew, unlike all of these people over here, Drew is friends with the Warren Wyatt friend group. Also the only one out of this entire group that is Facebook friends with Nolan. If this was the boys telling this information to the captain, why were they saying that their buddy's girlfriend was possibly involved with Nolan? And why would Trayston be snitching on his sister's friends like this? Now wait, one of Katie's BFFs, Nevaeh, is friends with a Caden McGrath. Caden is friends with 0 people from either group except for Nevaeh, as far as I can tell. Caden is somehow related to a Joe, who is frequently advertising on his page for the Biloxi Bay RV Resort. The one that I was saying that according to the GPS coordinates looks like they may have dropped somebody off at. So in my opinion, Joe is clearly somehow related to the Marty McGrath, who was the one who apparently took all these people on this boat, including Katie, when this friend group was supposedly left on this island. And I feel like that language is really important and overlooked because left makes it sound like your ride left without you. Now, according to Joe's LinkedIn, he is IT for the Ocean Marine Group, which is owned by Jerry Adkerson. Aiden is also the only person I can find who is friends with Captain Chris Seth Ward, the son of Chris Ward, who was called by Jerry to cancel the sea tow allegedly on his private line before the sea tow call was even finished. I also found a very weak connection through social media between Lainey and a girl who is in the same sorority as the girl who threw the party, Ava, allegedly threw the party. So what if Trayston's slick comment wasn't about Katie at all? Because I don't know about you guys, but we have seen absolutely zero proof that Katie was actually out there with them. They have kept the story hyper-focused on Katie, and no other girls' names have really gotten out. But if Katie has been the red herring this whole time, I don't know. I'm still trying to piece through. I'm still trying to figure it out because there's clearly a chunk that is missing out of this story. Like, I think Lainey is a red herring too, don't get me wrong, because I don't see these boys like freely offering up their motive or anything. But it sounds like maybe this Lainey girl was involved with Nolan behind her boyfriend's back at some point, and they tried to—
Okay, now this is where I want us to slow down, because Bree's video contains several different claims, and if you listen to them all together, it's easy to walk away thinking we just received confirmation of something. We didn't. What we received is a collection of questions that may be worth investigating. And the first one is that boat. According to the clip, a Triton boat was spotted behind what appeared to be a security fence. The person filming it noticed certain characteristics of the boat and began wondering whether it could be connected to the Triton reportedly associated with the Nolan Wells case. But even the person making that video acknowledged something extremely important. They weren't certain it was the same boat. That distinction matters, because a Triton is a boat manufacturer. Finding a Triton does not automatically mean you've found Nolan's boat. And a boat being behind a security fence doesn't automatically mean it was confiscated. It doesn't automatically mean law enforcement seized it. And it certainly doesn't establish that it was involved in Nolan's disappearance. So what would actually move this from speculation to something meaningful? Identification. The registration. The hull identification number. The owner. The exact make and model. The location. And whether that information connects to the timeline we're investigating. That's what I'd want to see. Because if someone can establish that the boat in that video is the exact boat connected to this case, then suddenly the question becomes much more interesting. But until then, it's a lead, not a conclusion. And then we get to the part I think is much more important. The MDMR report. Because according to the second portion of the discussion, an original report allegedly contains language indicating that Captain William Freeman was instructed to locate and interview a female subject who was possibly involved with the missing person on Horn Island. Now stop right there. That wording is interesting, but we have to be precise about what it means. Possibly involved does not mean suspect. It doesn't mean the person was accused of harming Nolan. It doesn't mean investigators believe that person committed a crime. It could simply mean investigators believe that person might have information relevant to Nolan's disappearance. That's why the real question isn't, why was she involved? The better question is, why did investigators believe she might have information? And even more importantly, who gave investigators her name? That is the part that deserves attention. Now, according to the material presented in Bree's video, there's a timeline involving Captain Freeman and the drone search on July 5th. The claim is that Freeman was on Horn Island attempting to launch a drone. The first attempts reportedly failed because of a software issue. Assistance was then requested. Another person was brought out to help with the drone operation. Eventually, the drone was successfully launched. Now, on its own, none of that is suspicious. That's simply an account of an investigation. But then another timeline is brought into the conversation. According to Morgan's account presented in the clip, Morgan, Tristan, and Wyatt were reportedly on the Palm Beach that morning and went out to Horn Island. They reportedly encountered MDMR personnel and provided information. And that's where the question becomes interesting. If that account is accurate, and if the MDMR timeline is accurate, and if the people involved were interacting with investigators during that same period, then one thing could potentially be established. There was an opportunity for investigators to receive information directly from people who were already there. But we don't know that this is how Lainey's name entered the report. That's an inference. And that's exactly where we have to separate what the source says from what the evidence actually proves. Here's the question I would want investigators to answer. Who first provided Laney's name? Was it one of the people on the Palm Beach? Was it somebody from the wider group? Was it already known to investigators? Did another witness provide it? Or did investigators arrive at the name independently? Because if that chain can be established, it could explain why her name appeared in the report. And if it cannot be established, then that's another question worth examining. Now let's talk about the timing. This is where the case becomes less about theories and more about records. Because if people are saying, I was here, I was on this boat, I spoke with these investigators, I left at this time, then those claims can potentially be tested. You don't have to argue about them online. You check the records, boat GPS, phone location data, marine communications, MDMR logs, officer reports, drone deployment records, call logs, photographs, videos, and timestamps. If those independent records line up with someone's account, that's meaningful. If they contradict it, that's also meaningful. And that's exactly why the timeline is so important. Now, here's another thing I want to be careful about. The source begins connecting different people through friendships, relationships, and social media connections. And this is where online investigations can become dangerous. Because a person being Facebook friends with someone doesn't mean they're involved in a crime. Dating someone doesn't mean they're involved in a crime. Being part of the same friend group doesn't mean they're involved. Knowing someone who knows someone doesn't establish anything. But those relationships can potentially help investigators understand a social network. That's different. A relationship is a lead. It isn't proof. And then we get into the names. Laney, Katie, Drew, Jacob, Aiden, Joe, and several other people connected through the different groups being discussed. What caught my attention isn't necessarily who knows who. It's the broader question, who was actually present? Because that's something that should theoretically be reconstructible. If there were dozens of people connected to the July 4th gathering, there should eventually be a clearer picture of who arrived, who left, who was on which boat, who stayed on the island, who returned, who was interviewed, who wasn't interviewed, and what did each person tell investigators. That is much more important than trying to connect people through Instagram or Facebook. And then there's the theory about Katie. The source raises the possibility that Katie could have been a red herring. Again, that's a theory. We don't know that. There may be a completely legitimate reason her name received attention. And the same applies to Laney. The fact that her name appears in a report does not establish that she played a role in Nolan's disappearance. What we can ask is, why was her name there? What did investigators believe she knew? Was she interviewed? What did she tell them? And did anything she said ultimately change the investigation? Those are legitimate questions. Now there's another claim in the source that I want to address carefully. The suggestion that the FBI may be moving on the case. That would obviously be significant if officially confirmed. But right now, based on what we're discussing here, we should not present that as a fact. A boat behind a security fence does not prove federal involvement. A new report does not prove an FBI investigation. And social media videos being removed do not, by themselves, prove that somebody is trying to suppress information about Nolan. Those are interpretations. They may turn out to be right. They may turn out to be completely wrong. Until there's confirmation, they're simply claims. And that's exactly how we're going to treat them. But something else happened in Bree's video that I think is worth emphasizing. She essentially went back to the beginning. And sometimes that's exactly where investigators need to go. Because when a case becomes complicated, everybody starts focusing on the newest theory. The newest photograph, the newest TikTok, the newest name, the newest accusation. But the answer can sometimes be sitting inside an original report that people didn't fully understand the first time they read it. That's why old documents matter. That's why original statements matter. That's why timestamps matter. And that's why the next source we're about to hear is important. Because Nerdy Pinky goes even deeper into the report and the relationships surrounding the names that appear in it. And I want you to hear her entire argument before we break it apart. So don't go anywhere. This is where it gets even deeper.
Yeah, watch. All right, so I'm here with Biloxi Cooking and Fishing.
What's going on, yo?
And we are boat hunting today. We are out here looking at, no, it does say security. Let me show you what's right next to the fucking wildcat we just found. Look at there. What? What? What's interesting?
The trim's not hooked up on.
What do you mean? What does that mean?
See those two rods coming out of the...
Yeah, but I don't know what that means.
That's the trim. What
Okay.
that does is that makes that motor do that.
Okay.
Okay? So if the trim is not hooked up, and they were saying that they had issues with the trim, assuming this is the boat, and I'm not sure because I don't see a name on it.
Hold on. There's a key still in it too. Let's get nice and in.
By the way, people, just to let y'all know, if somebody says we're trespassing, we are on city easement, so kiss our ass.
Out the gate.
We are on city easement.
Okay, that was a lot. And honestly, this is where we need to be even more careful. Because Nerdy Pinky's breakdown brings together documents, timelines, relationships, and social media research and attempts to connect those pieces into a larger theory. Some of the underlying questions are legitimate, but the conclusions being drawn from those connections are still claims. And that's the distinction I want to leave you with. Let's start with the strongest part, the report. If the wording in the original MDMR report is accurately represented, then the language concerning a female subject being possibly involved with the missing person on Horn Island is absolutely something worth understanding. Not because it proves wrongdoing, but because it tells us investigators were looking for information from someone they believed might have relevance to Nolan's disappearance. So the natural question is, what happened after that? Was she located? Was she interviewed? What did she say? And why was she considered potentially relevant? Those are questions that could potentially be answered through the actual investigative records. Then there's the Morgan timeline. Again, if his statement accurately places himself, Tristan and Wyatt on the Palm Beach during that window, that gives investigators another timestamp to test. But here's the important part. His statement itself isn't enough. You want independent confirmation, phone location, boat GPS, photos, video metadata, marine records, witnesses, anything that can independently establish where that boat was. That's how you move from, he said he was there, to the available records show he was there. Those are very different levels of evidence. Now let's talk about the social media connections. This is where I think viewers need to put the brakes on, because when you start seeing this person is friends with this person's boyfriend knows this person knows somebody connected to the boat, it can feel like you're watching a giant conspiracy come together. But social networks are naturally interconnected, especially in a relatively tight social circle. People date, people go to school together, people work together. People know each other's siblings. People follow each other online. That doesn't mean there's a criminal connection. So I would not use those relationships to accuse anybody. What they can do is help establish who knew whom and where to look for witnesses. That's it. And then There's the swimsuit comparison. The source attempts to use similar or matching swimsuits to connect people to photographs from different occasions. That's interesting as a lead, but it isn't reliable enough by itself to establish someone's identity. The same swimsuit can be owned by multiple people. People can wear the same brand. People can borrow clothing. And photographs can distort colors and patterns. So if investigators wanted to establish who was actually on the boat, they would need much stronger identification evidence than a swimsuit. They'd want the original photograph or video. Higher resolution images, multiple angles, metadata, witness identification, and potentially other records placing that person there. Then we get to the bigger theory. Could Katie have been a red herring? Could Laney have been a red herring? Could investigators have been given incomplete information? Could there be other people who haven't received the same level of public attention? Yes, those are possibilities. But possibilities are not conclusions. And that's why I'm not going to sit here and tell you that we have solved the Nolan Wells case. We haven't. Nobody watching these videos has enough publicly established evidence to make that claim. But I will tell you what I think this development does. It gives us more questions that can actually be tested. And that's important. Because a good question isn't, who do you think did it? A better question is, what evidence would prove or disprove that theory? That's the standard we should be using. So here's what I would want to see next. The original MDMR report. The complete version, not just a screenshot. The surrounding pages. The exact wording. The date and time of each entry. Who created the report? Who provided the information? And what happened after the female subject was identified? Then, I want the boat timeline. Which boat was where? At what time? Who was aboard? What records exist? And can those records independently confirm the accounts we've heard? Then, I want the phone data. Because phones don't care about somebody's theory. A location record either places a device somewhere or it doesn't. A timestamp either matches or it doesn't. That's the kind of evidence that can cut through speculation. And finally, I want to know whether there are additional people who haven't been publicly discussed. Because if the larger group really was as large as some accounts suggest, then the public picture we're seeing may still be incomplete. That doesn't mean there is a conspiracy. It simply means we need the complete timeline. And that's where I think the Nolan Wells case currently stands. We have claims. We have reports. We have statements. We have photographs. We have boat questions. We have timeline questions. We have people trying to connect the dots. But we still have a huge difference between something that looks suspicious online and something that can actually be proven. And that difference matters, because Nolan's family doesn't need another internet theory. They need answers, real answers, answers that can survive scrutiny, answers that can survive courtrooms, answers that don't collapse the moment somebody asks, "Where's the evidence?" So as these new developments continue coming out, we're going to keep doing exactly what we did here. We'll show you the source. We'll let you hear the claims directly. And then we'll come back and ask, what do we actually know? What don't we know? And what can be independently verified? Because that's how you follow a case responsibly. And if something eventually gets confirmed, we'll report that. If something gets disproven, we'll report that too. We're not married to a theory. We're married to the truth. So I want to hear from you. After watching both of those clips, what is the biggest question you think investigators need to answer next? Is it the boat? Is it the MDMR report? Is it how Laney's name entered that report? Is it the timeline of the Palm Beach? Is it the full list of people who were on those boats? Or is there another piece of this case that you think we're missing? Tell me in the comments. And tell me where you're watching from. If you want us to keep following these Nolan Wells developments as they come in, hit that like button, subscribe to the Black Docket, and share this video. Because when the next piece of information drops, we'll be here to examine it. Not the rumor, not the accusation,